Tonight on the Daily Wrap, is Ben Carson making a late summer move on the Donald? Iowan voters suggest the answer may be a resounding yes. And is a wall along the southern border all we really need to stop illegal immigration? Not according to Scott Walker, who has some blueprints for construction along the Canadian border. And after 30 million big ones spent in the in the wall-to-wall advertising campaign to stop the Iran nuclear deal, is Obama still winning the war? All this along with viewer comments and yay and nay tonight, because this is the Daily Wrap live from New York City. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Rick Unger. Joe Concha has the day off. My co-host tonight, you know her, you love her, the beautiful and talented, I'm just going for it tonight, right? Heather Hansen, Philadelphia's finest and America's pundit. Sitting to your right tonight, who we got here? We have chief strategist at Bellpoint and new to the Daily Wrap, his first appearance, David Nelson is here. Finally, he's a Forbes.com columnist and an Emmy. Why do we always say you're an Emmy winner? I don't even believe
does anybody else have an Emmy on his channel?
Well, apparently I haven't brought it. He is, of course, Emmy winner Bill Tucker.
Yes.
So welcome, everyone. All right, let's get right to the Daily Download. So just when it looked like the entire GOP nomination process was being swallowed whole by Donald Trump, a new Iowa poll out today suggests that the campaign of accomplished neurosurgeon Dr. Ben Carson, a campaign that has been maintaining a low-key approach throughout the summer in contrast to the Trump extravaganza, may be on the rise. According to the Monmouth University poll, Carson has now pulled into a dead heat with the Donald, as each is now registering 23% of those likely to participate in the Iowa caucus. What's more, Carson is registering an astounding 81% favorability rating, even as Trump's favorabilities have risen from 47% to 52%. Heather Hansen, is it possible that Ben Carson is now ready to make his charge and depose Trump as the frontrunner in the GOP race?
I think anything is possible in this election. I think that we have seen that the public does not want a politician. You know, the top three people are Carson, Trump, and Carly. I think that we're going to see a lot of ups and downs, although I think we'll continue to see the non-politicians bringing it in Iowa. I think that's what they want.
David, you know, the one thing that we keep seeing here, and there's just no getting around it, we're seeing it particularly in Iowa, where Trump and Carson are both tied. Carly Fiorina is now running a third. The one thing they all have in common is they're not professional politicians.
Heather makes a great point, because that is really the one thing they all have in common, and it's what the American electorate wants on both sides of the political divide right now. Mm-hmm. I'm encouraged by some of these poll numbers. I think it says something to our society in the fact that Americans are just saying no mas when it comes to Washington anymore. They're looking for something different, and if you have that kind of a message right now, certainly Trump does, Ben Carson does, and now Carly Fiorina does, all coming from the other side of the divide. I think it's very exciting for certainly the Republican Party right now.
I think it is exciting for the Republican Party. And Bill, you know, we can agree that there's a real allure to non-politician politicians. Right. But at some point, does the voting public have to go, well, wait a second. Yeah, this is really cool. These guys aren't politicians. They've been successful in other parts of life. And each of those three has indeed been very successful. But don't they have to ask the question, do these guys know what it takes? No. Do they have the skills to be president of the United States?
That's not a qualifier. You don't have to ask that question. These are very successful individuals, each in their own right. They're interesting people. They're compelling people. They're marked contrast in styles. I can't imagine two guys more different than Ben Carson and Donald Trump.
But Dave, doesn't it take a certain temperament?
I think in the end, what it really boils down to be, a chief executive is who you surround yourself with. And I don't care whether it's a country or a corporation. You surround yourself with the very best. I think that's probably one of the failings of the Obama administration was maybe sticking with certain leaders within certain divisions too long and not eliminating the chaff when somebody made a big mistake. Sign of a good leader is knowing who to put on your team and when to keep them and when to get rid of them.
Well, and we saw with President Obama, he didn't have a ton of experience. And once he was elected, I think all bets were off. I think a lot of people said, you know what, we can bring in somebody who doesn't have the experience. This may be a sea change in politics.
But as the saying goes, the buck stops here. And that came from somebody who was president of the United States. Don't you have to, I mean, just look at the three that we're talking about, the three who were leading in Iowa, right? You look at them, Dr. Carson, lovely man, no question about it, despite him saying that people who go to jail come out gay. But a lovely man. Does he have the temperament and the background to be president of the United States? Carly Fiorina, I would say she has more of that. Right. You know, she does have more of that managerial, hands-on, get something done. Trump is basically a financier. Yeah, he builds things, but he's a financier. Are you going to sit there straight-faced and say that 2 out of the 3 of those people don't give you pause?
They give me pause for sure, but I think that David's point is correct. If they surround themselves with the right people, if they have the right, because being the
we always
president,
complain that the presidents don't listen to the people they surround themselves with.
Well, they're going to have to. But if you look at people who are good in business, that's one of the traits that they tend to have. They do listen to the people who are advising them because you can't be an expert in everything. So you have to have the right people with their expertise.
I think that's a question you could have asked a lot of presidents as they stepped into office. Certainly President Obama when he came in. In the end, it's the organizational structure that you put in place.
Right.
And I firmly believe that
on.
at least 2 of those 3 are going to be able to do it.
Okay. Well, while Carson and Trump have been careful not to offend or insult one another at this point in the campaign, the reemergence of a 2014 tweet posted by Trump could create some real tension between the 2 candidates. The posting on Trump's Twitter account reads, "Sadly, because President Obama has done such a poor job as president, you won't see another black president for generations." Now, one might imagine that Dr. Carson could take a little exception to such a remark. Bill, don't you think so?
I think he could maybe take an exception at that.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's I don't, and I have no idea. You know, we keep trying to write Trump off, and every dumb thing he says, he seems to go higher in the polls. So I frankly don't know what people are going to make
How
of
does
this.
that
I think it came from last year. I doubt he meant it as a racist remark, and it's the kind of shoot from the hip.
What do you think he meant it as? I'm curious.
I think he shoots from the hip. I actually think words come out of his mouth, and he wishes he didn't say it. But then what he does is he doubles down.
That's a
and
great
goes all
thing
the way
for
to
a
the end
president to do. What a wonderful trait for somebody who
I
wants
said
to be
2 out of 3,
president.
not 3 out of 3.
Oh, okay. You didn't say which ones. That's true.
Interesting that was sent at 12:15 a.m. I
Yeah.
mean, the man doesn't seem to get a whole lot of sleep. Maybe he was just a little sleep deprived. I don't think Ben Carson would be offended by that, though. I think that he would say, you know,
Really?
I would be, because what he's saying is that President Obama was not a good president, and I don't think that Ben Carson necessarily would disagree with that.
Well, as it turns out, Ben Carson may not be the only potential black candidate for president who would take a little bit of exception to Trump's tweet. Let's watch this.
If my grandfather was here right now, he would not let me back down. I don't know what I'm finna lose after this. It don't matter though, cause it ain't about me. It's about ideas, bro. New ideas. People with ideas. People who believe in truth. And yes, as you probably could have guessed by this moment, I have decided in 2020 to run for president.
And that, of course, was Kanye West at last night's MTV Video Music Awards. So what do you think, guys? Will Kanye prove Trump wrong and become the next black American president? Heather Hansen.
You know what? From what we've seen with Donald Trump, you just don't know. You don't even know what he's going to run as a Republican or a Democrat.
You think Trump called him today and asked him to join the ticket?
No, not
Trump
at
West?
all. First of all, he could have said 2050, and he's not going to be held accountable for this. You know, I was a recording artist for half of my adult life, and I can tell you that recording artists, you know, go over the top to rile up the audience. That's what all this was about, nothing more.
Oh, darn, he's
Bill?
not going to really run.
No, he's
I'm
not.
so disappointed. I thought
I
he
did
meant
too. I
it.
thought it was going to happen.
Because, you know, we need another arrogant guy who wants to be president of the United States and says things inappropriately.
Well, I don't think we can put up with a 14-minute rant. I mean, he's competing with Putin for
Actually,
time.
the funniest part was he had to wait for the applause. He stood there for 4 of those minutes waiting for people to applaud. Okay, now that Ben Carson is in second place, we want to know who your choice for the 2016 presidential nominee is. Has it changed? Go to newsmaxpolls.com and cast your vote. Coming up next, speaking of the GOP nomination, 3 candidates talked immigration reform over the weekend. We'll tell you what they said.
If we're spending millions of dollars on TSA at our airports, if we're spending all sorts of money on port security, it only makes sense to me that if part of what we're trying to do is protect ourselves, set aside immigration for a minute, but protect ourselves from risk out there, I think we should make sure we have a secure border.
Why are we always talking about the southern border and building a fence there? We don't talk about a northern border.
That is a legitimate issue for us to look at. It wasn't just about building a wall and securing our borders. It was also about making sure our intelligence community has the ability for counter-terrorism and the ability to go after the infrastructure they need to protect us.
That, of course, was Wisconsin Governor and GOP candidate Scott Walker talking about whether we should build a wall along our northern border with Canada to thwart illegal immigrants from coming from above rather than below. While the proposal has caused a tidal wave of rolling eyeballs across the nation, it turns out that there actually is a fair amount of illegal immigration coming through the northern border. While the countries of origin tend to be different than those entering along the southern border, and no, not too many Canadians are seeking illegal entry into our country, the problem was enough to cause U.S. Customs and Border Protection to spend $20 million last year installing a surveillance system to crack down on the practice. So, David, has Governor Walker taken a leave of his senses, or is this a good idea and something he should be pushing?
No, look, it's a political opportunity. So obviously everybody on the Republican side is going to weigh in on this. I don't know if we need a wall. Maybe we just need to fund, our law enforcement, organizations, and even the military better than we have. I'm sure we can secure our borders. As a nation, it's the United States of America. We can't secure the border.
Can I point out one tiny little problem?
One tiny thing.
Insignificant, I grant you, but tiny little problem. Virtually all of the illegal immigration that does come from the north comes by boat, either over the lakes that separate us or down the St. Lawrence waterway. Now, that would mean you'd have to build a wall up at the edges of the lakes, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't do any good, which means all of that tourism, all those people who like to go, they're going to have to go through the wall to get to hang out on Lake Michigan. I don't think that's going to work out so well.
Well, and Canada actually responded to this and talked about the importance of tourism and the importance of trade. But Bill, do you think Walker really meant build a wall, or do you think he was talking about putting more resources in making sure making sure immigration isn't?
No, I think this phrase "a wall" might be taking on sort of a metaphor is what I'm looking for. No, we need to secure our borders, and we can secure our borders, as David suggested. We don't have to build a wall. In fact, it's practically, physically impossible to build a wall. As a reporter, I've been to both the northern and the southern border, and when you go to those borders, what you realize when you're down there for a while is people go back and forth. People get in their boat in Canada and drive over to the U.S., spend the day drinking, and get in their boat and drive back.
So are you saying it's virtually impossible to build a wall on both borders?
Yeah, no, I do. But
Glad you said that. We'll get to that soon.
I don't think you have to. I mean, it doesn't have to be Escape from New York.
Well, tell that to Donald Trump, the greatest wall builder of all time.
But I think Scott Walker's point is that we spend a lot of money at airports to make sure that we are maintaining integrity of our security there, and the same has to be done at the borders. I don't think he necessarily means a wall. No. I think a lot of these candidates don't necessarily mean a wall. I don't know about the
I think Donald
Trump
does, and I think Ted Cruz really means a wall.
Well, where we spend almost no money, where we secure very little, are some of major weaknesses along our border, which are the ports. Right. We spend very little. The nuclear devices could come into our border. I'm not trying to be alarmist. They could.
You're right. You're mentioning a nuclear device. That's not alarming?
Well, listen, it wasn't only Walker who is causing some upset with regard to immigration. We've also got the Chris Christie, who had some things to say about immigrants and what we should be doing about that.
Here for a moment.
So here's what I'm going to do as president. I'm going to ask Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, come work for the government for 3 months. Just come for 3 months to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We need to have a system that tracks you from the moment you come in And then when your time is up, whether it's 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, however long your visa is, then we go get you and tap you on the shoulder and say, excuse me, thanks for coming, time to go.
Listen, it is true that one of the largest problems we have with illegal immigration involves those who enter the country on a legal visit but fail to leave when that visit expires.
Yes.
Is it practical to imagine that we can actually tag these people, Bill?
Don't tag it. Where's this tag? Rick says tag. It's like they're animals. You're going to shoot them in their ears. No, he wants to tag their visa so that we know when their visa expires where they are.
We let people into this drawer somewhere.
No,
Unless you're going to tattoo
no.
a barcode on their head. I don't see how it works, because
No, but
that's how
here's
you
the-
track a FedEx package.
No. Here's the deal, though. People come into this country, we have no idea when their visa expires because we don't track when it expires. We have no idea where they go to because once they come in, they're gone. We don't know where they go to.
So
and
how
we're not
does
gonna
Christie's
physically
plan
locate
solve
them.
that?
I don't know, but he's not an
It's
idiot.
not even an
He's not an
original-
idiot for talking about it.
Heather, it's not even
a
a-
serious
the
problem.
problem is
He's
not
an
that
idiot
he's
for
talking
talking
about. You're absolutely right. It is a real. It's our biggest problem.
It is
Our
a
biggest
with it.
problem.
But
It
his
is.
suggestion is silly
But you know
because you
what?
cannot tag people
But-
like FedEx.
But what's the answer?
Well, the answer is, first of all, this is not an original idea. I believe if you go back and look at YouTube, you're going to find that Newt Gingrich actually talked about this several years ago. So I don't think it worked then. It's not going to work now. And like I said, unless you have barcodes on people and unless you're pulling them in and putting a little scanner on like the FedEx guy, it ain't going to work.
All right, well, not to be left out of the immigration discussion, we've got Governor Jeb Bush offering up his own suggestions when appearing on a New York radio show this weekend. Governor Bush proposed that a virtual fence along the southern border would be more effective than an actual fence.
The wall doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You can't build a wall in rugged terrain like it exists there. What they need is more support for local law enforcement. They need the Border Patrol to be unleashed, if you will, and forward lean towards the border. The former head of the Border Patrol in that region told me that there's technologies available to create, in effect, a virtual fence that can be quite effective.
Well, guys, we don't have a lot of time, but what do you think, Rick? Does Governor Bush have a point here?
Governor Bush is the only one who's telling the truth. It's not very exciting, but he's right.
Well, what do you people think has the best solution to our immigration problem? Let us know at newsmaxtv.com/comments. Up next, the summer is over. Are we any closer to resolving the Iran deal?
Welcome back to the Daily Wrap. Let's check in with Steve Malzberg and see what he has planned for tonight. Steve.
All right, Rick, coming up right after the Daily Wrap, Mike Huckabee joins us for an exclusive interview. We'll ask him about the latest numbers from Iowa. Here's a man who won it 8 years ago, of course. Also, Hillary makes a boxcars reference, a reference to the Holocaust. Nobody says boo. You remember what happened to Governor Huckabee when he said oven. So we'll talk to him about that. Also, Alan Keyes is here. Not a big fan of Donald Trump, as you will hear. We got the Malzberg panel over the Texas police officer shooting and much more coming up next at 7 p.m. Eastern, right after the Daily Wrap.
Who thought I'd ever have something in common with Alan Keyes? Well, wonders never cease. So, despite spending some $30 million in television advertising and lobbying during the month of May, actually the month of August, the opponents of the Iran nuclear deal may be coming up empty in their effort to block the Obama administration's treaty with Iran. While key Democrats like Senators Chuck Schumer and Bob Menendez have broken ranks with the White House over the agreement, the August effort to steer other Democratic members of Congress away from the deal now appears to have hit a wall, as even red state Democrats are indicating they will support Obama and his treaty. Now, with only a few more Democrats needed in the Senate to support a successful filibuster, which would thwart a resolution condemning the treaty, it is now more likely than not that the president will be spared the need to veto any such resolutions, as the plan will now die on its own in the Senate. Heather Hansen, I mean, this is looking more and more like a reality, which frankly surprises me. I did think the resolutions would pass both chambers of Congress and that the president would have to veto it and win it that way, but now not necessarily.
I think we've always thought that, and it really shows the power of politics over what people actually want. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit later
Yeah.
about the polls,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter. And I think what they're counting on is the fact that people are going to be, for the next election, so focused on the economy and things that are important here at home, and less so on what happened in the past.
Well, David, isn't this an instance where, because this deal is so technical, and I know, you listen, I've seen the arguments on both sides. I accept the arguments on both sides. I see the logic that I hear from different people. How can we expect the American people, and I'm usually the one yelling that they need to be better educated, how can we expect them to reach an intelligent decision that can guide their representatives?
It is pretty technical, and I'm not surprised it's come to this. Look, until Iran recognizes the right of Israel to exist, this is going to be a toxic issue in this country. Certainly the Jewish communities around this country. This is why a lot of people in the DNC, they just want to see this go away. They don't want to vote on it either way. They don't like the deal. They don't want the deal. The constituency doesn't want the deal, but they want to support their president. That's all this is about. It's about politics, just like Heather
David
said.
said the magic words. He said the people in the DNC just want to see this go away. I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's not just the DNC. I think the Democrats in Congress want to see it go away. Do you think that by nipping it earlier than having to go through a veto process, it protects the Democrats from having to deal with it?
No, absolutely. And we saw the move by Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's also the head of the DNC, keeping a resolution off the floor so that people wouldn't have to vote on it, in particular her. There's a lot of politics at play here. And yeah, nip it in the bud early and don't let it get too far along, and you might get away with it.
Yeah, I think you're thinking. And as Heather referred, did you have something you wanted to
Yeah,
add? Go
I
ahead,
have
David.
something. First of all, this is an executive order, and this is what President Obama wants. He wants to make this his legacy. And, you know, half the
It's not an
Republicans...
executive order, it's an executive agreement.
An executive agreement, excuse me. All right, but half the Republicans running for president have said they're going to tear this thing up within hours after they're
I don't really
sworn in.
believe them, but they're saying
But let's say that's true. How can this be a legacy if that in fact could happen?
Yeah, if you have a Republican presidency. In the meantime, though, Heather, you alluded to this. While the Democrats in the Senate may not be getting the message, a new Quinnipiac poll reveals that 55% of Americans do not favor the deal. That's in stark contrast to an early April Washington Post ABC News poll that indicated that 59% of Americans did favor the deal. So what's responsible, guys, for this change of heart on the part of the American public, Heather?
I think the more information that we get, the more that it looks like it's a bad deal. You know, the fact that they're continue to have their proxy wars. They now have money to do their proxy wars, that they get to inspect themselves. And I think the frustration, and now I think we may see it on the Democratic side, these politicians are supposed to be working for us, and yet it's never what we want. It's whatever politics.
Bill, is it as Heather's suggesting, is it actually more information in the months that have passed, or is it more money in television commercials being spent by the opponents, way outspending those who support the deal?
Well, you can't really separate the two of them, I suppose, ultimately, but I agree with Heather. I think the more that this gets discussed and the more that people realize the terms that this deal was conducted under and agreed upon, I think they're finding it distasteful.
I'm going to just say three words: state-sponsored terrorism. I think that's what's in the back of everybody's mind.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, what if it turns out, just quickly, Heather, that this deal works?
Well,
What are we going to be saying in a few years?
Works how? I mean, we won't know. We won't really know for a very long time.
Yeah, I suppose that's right. And I guess that's my point. Because we don't know, maybe we shouldn't be so sure about it. Either way, in any event, we want to know what you think about the Iran deal. Let us know at newsmaxtv.com/comments. Coming up, you'll never guess who wants Vice President Joe Biden to enter the race.
What do you think of Joe Biden, and do you think he should get into the race?
I'd love to see Joe get in the race.
Because?
Well, go for it, Joe. He's tried twice before. He obviously is interested. I think there's a lot of support for him in the Democratic Party. I think it would stir things up. They're short candidates on their side, so I'd urge Joe to have a shot at it.
That was, of course, former Vice President Dick Cheney on CNN this morning telling current Vice President Joe Biden to go for it, take a shot at the presidency. Now, Biden, who still has not announced his plans, is polling better than the current Democratic frontrunner, Hillary Clinton, particularly in the favorability and trustworthiness departments. The latest Quinnipiac poll finds that the vice president's favorability ratings is 9 points higher than Mrs. Clinton's, while his trustworthiness ratings come in a substantial 22 points higher than Mrs. Clinton's. The survey also suggests that were the election to be held today, Biden would beat Donald Trump and Jeb Bush by a larger percentage than Mrs. Clinton. We'll start with you, Heather. What do we make of all this? I mean, this has got to be the strangest early election season I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think everything is sort of all asunder and things need to settle down a little bit. But if you're Joe Biden, you're looking at those numbers, and if he doesn't run, I think that it would be a real mistake. I think that it will open up the discussion. He has a real opportunity here, and he should capitalize on it.
David, what's really on Vice President Cheney's mind? What's he really thinking here?
Well, I think he wants to shake up the Democratic Party. I think that's first and foremost what he wants to do. But I'm not sure Joe Biden really has the fire in his belly to do this. He's done it twice.
Particularly given his current
circumstances. It's pretty rough go for him right now. I understand that it was the dying wish of his son, but he's been through this twice. It's a draining experience to go through it once again and fail a third time. I don't think he wants to do that.
What do you think, Bill?
I tend to agree with David. I just don't think he doesn't seem to have that fire. And Frank, why would you ask Dick Cheney Joe Biden should run? That's the question on my mind.
You know, it's just possible. I mean, look, these guys are politicians and all that, but Cheney and Biden could have an excellent relationship for all I know.
But Biden has a great cross-the-aisle relationship.
He
That's
does.
true.
With many people.
And, you know, Heather, you do have to acknowledge, and I'm sure Biden gets this, candidates have a funny way of being really popular before they become candidates.
That's right. That's right. And I think we see that. I mean, the fact that Bernie Sanders is creeping up on Hillary, I think you see that people want non-politicians, and Biden is yet another politician.
Yeah, that's true. Well, here's a shock. There's more bad news for Hillary Clinton as a new Des Moines Register Bloomberg Politics poll in Iowa. Say that quickly. Des Moines Register Bloomberg Politics Iowa poll finds Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is now only 7 points behind the former Secretary of State in the state of Iowa. According to the poll, Mrs. Clinton has 37% of likely Democrat caucus goers, while Senator Sanders currently holds 30%. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is sitting with 14% despite not having entered the race as of yet. Note that this is the first time that Mrs. Clinton has been below 50% in the Iowa polls. Here's the question that has to be asked and that you can't avoid. If Hillary wins the Iowa caucus, but really just squeaks it out. And we know that she's had trouble in Iowa before. We can all remember 2008. Or if she loses, and then you go to New Hampshire where Bernie is really doing well, is that the end of Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, I mean, then her momentum will be gone. And these email problems, her other problems aren't going away. They're only going to continue to follow her. I think she'll have some real problems if she doesn't win Iowa and win it well. She may be facing the end.
Bill, don't you think that's, I mean, from what we're seeing, if these polls were to continue, now there's a long time between now and Iowa, and in politics it's years. But if Hillary's situation doesn't settle down, I think that's the right choice of words. If it doesn't settle down and she's struggling through Iowa, and let's say Joe Biden does not get into this horse race, what the heck happens to the Democrats?
Well, I think what's going to happen is that a lot of friends of mine who are Bernie Sanders supporters are going to get their dearest dreams come true, which is that finally the press will start listening and covering Bernie Sanders instead of just Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden.
David, is there any scenario where Bernie Sanders becomes president of the United States?
I don't think so. I certainly hope not. Look, people view Bernie Sanders, he's the real deal. Yes. He believes what he stands for, and they look at Hillary, she's a chameleon. You know, surely she's right of center in the Democratic Party in her heart, but she's catering to the left, the uber left, because she knows that's what she has to do to get elected. Whereas Bernie Sanders, he is telling you exactly what he believes and exactly what he will do.
Isn't it true that there's only going to be one commercial that the Republicans have to run in that general election? I am a socialist. I am a socialist. 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 That's all they got to do. How does he win an election in this country?
I don't know if people care that he's a socialist
Really?
once they hear what he's going to do for them. I mean, there are a lot of people who are really let down with politics. They want somebody who's out for them, and he, in many ways, is similar to Trump.
I'd like to believe you're right. I have a sneaking suspicion that people will care. But maybe we'll get to find out. I still don't think so. I don't think he ever gets a nomination. What do you make of former Vice President Dick Cheney urging Vice President Joe Biden to run? We know there's something else going on there. Go to newsmaxtv.com/comments to let us know. Coming up next, we're going to read some of your viewer comments. Don't make a move.
You know,
And we're back with your viewer comments. First up, we have some comments on immigration. Here's one from Joseph, who says Hillary Clinton is saying that the Republicans want to put illegal immigrants in boxcars and ship them back home. Well, Hillary Clinton put our ambassador in Libya and 3 super military personnel in Benghazi in boxes, not boxcars. Well, I don't even know how to respond to that. Look, and setting aside the darkness of the comment, we do have to acknowledge that what Mr. Trump has proposed, and I think there have been some others who've gone along with it, if you really think that you're going to round up all of the illegal immigrants in this country, I'd love to hear what the viewer's perspective is on how they're going to go away.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone knows. They just want it done, and no one has an answer. No one has an answer.
Do you guys favor that in any way, shape, or form?
I don't know how you would implement
Right.
it in a humane way, other than looking like, Gestapo troops running through the
Right.
cities,
Right.
taking people out of their homes.
You put your finger on the problem. Look, I understand people's frustration, and I understand that when they say, hey, they entered illegally, why should I care how they get back home? I want them out. They broke our laws. But you need to factor into that your own image of America. Is America the kind of place that does the things that you just said?
I don't think it is.
And I don't think we ever want it to be.
Well, I mean, there's some people who do. We've got a comment from Joanne who says Trump is on target with immigration. If you live in Texas, you have seen it all. And I think that Joanne's point is when you live in a border community and you've seen a lot of these things, then you are willing to do some things that you might think are un-American.
Yeah.
But to them, they're very much protecting America from what they see as the downfall.
And we've seen that before too in this country, where people thought that they were bending the principles of America to do something that had to be done, and it has never gone well.
I think enforcing the border security is a lot different than marching through cities, taking people out. I think Americans would embrace, the first concept, not the second.
I completely agree with that.
No, and the reality is, which never gets reported on, is what happens down there across that border is actually really dark and scary because there are a lot of incursions by people you don't want to meet, and often the only body of police there to get them is 12 detectives or 12 sheriff's deputies in a county the size of New York State. It's just ridiculous.
Again, I'm going to come back to what Jeb Bush said this weekend, and a weekend of some pretty crazy things being said. I thought his points were fair. And he did talk about the need for more border patrol that are not being hampered by rules. Yeah, and I think you'll find progressives will actually get on board with a lot of this. Anyhow, I think I was speaking about Donald Trump a minute ago, so let's talk about him some more, because no shock here. We have some comments from you. Here's one from TL, who says, American citizens no longer want professional politicians who are experienced at doing a bad job. American citizens do want Donald Trump or another non-professional politician like Trump who is experienced at being successful. I think he puts that, or she puts that, very well.
Yep. Fran says it is so refreshing to listen to Donald Trump. Some say he's not a conservative. Who cares? We have had conservatives. They are doing nothing. And I think Trump would, which is what we need.
I got to say something. We get these comments every night. We read them. And I'm really starting to see viewers hone in. And they're starting to present a very rational reason for Donald Trump. Isn't that interesting? Because I would have predicted to you not long ago, as time goes on, they're going to go the other way and see less of a rationale. But those two comments were right to the point, completely sensible, and very much honed in.
It's right to the point, but how sensible will it be when that person is sitting in the executive chair and actually has his finger on a nuclear button?
Well, I think
that's the scary part for a lot of Americans that they're not going to be able to embrace.
But what these people are saying, why should we expect that Donald Trump would do a worse job even with his finger on the button than the people that we've had who haven't been very successful?
Well, and especially, I think these people are probably especially upset with the job that President Obama has done. So they're like, well, can't get much worse.
Probably. All right, well, here's one from Mary, who says, Donald Trump says what he believes. He doesn't have to pussyfoot around big money supporters. I think that's being a little bit overstated.
Yes, and I think especially now that he's looking for some
Well, of course
outside
he is.
money.
I got
so.
an email 3-4 weeks ago raising money for Donald Trump.
From
So-
you. Lovely.
Go get him.
Here's one from Donald about Donald Trump. Donald says, I'm sure that Donald Trump is running his campaign like he runs his business, with a plan, a business plan. Everything is thought out and assessed before he says anything. He has projected the end results at the beginning. He is not a clown nor a fool.
Well, I'm not going to say he's a clown or a fool, but I disagree with virtually everything else that person said. It's the worst planned campaign I think I've ever seen.
It's doing awfully well.
It is,
It's
but he
doing
says
awfully
working.
well.
It is,
whether
it
worst or
is.
best.
but he
It's because
just
it's
says
so
what
poorly planned
comes
that
to
that's
his
why it
mind.
is working.
All right, finally, here's one from John who says, I'm so sick of President Obama and Hillary Clinton lying to the American people. When are we going to say enough is enough? These pathetic people are a disgrace to our nation. Wake up, America, before it's too late. Well, you're entitled to your opinion, obviously. I would just kind of say all politicians lie to you. I'm not going to say these haven't, but they all do it.
Well,
Agree?
That's why people don't want politicians anymore.
Well,
that's
that
why our
might be
top
right.
Look,
three
and
are
I
not.
agree. Then go do something like vote them out of office.
All right. Well, remember, if you want to weigh in on these issues that we talk about here, be sure to go to newsmaxtv.com/comments to let us know what you think. Coming up next, time for Yay or Nay. This is the Daily Wrap. It's that time again, time for Yay or Nay. First up, how do you feel about your federal government? If you're unhappy, you'll be happier to know that you're not alone. According to the new Quinnipiac poll out today, I said the new because we've used it about 5 times. 71% of Americans are dissatisfied with our country, 71%, with 41% saying they are very dissatisfied. Even worse, 51% of Americans say they only sometimes trust the government, while 34% say they hardly ever do. Given the fact that there's such serious disagreements between everybody in the public when it comes to how our country should be going forward, is it appropriate to blame government, or does the fault lie with ourselves? I say the real fault does rest with we, the voters. Why? Because we don't take our responsibilities as citizens seriously. We don't do our homework. We send people to represent us without knowing much about them. Heather Hansen, yay or nay?
But they're supposed to represent us, and
Yeah.
they're not. I mean, we look at that
But we
Iran.
pick them.
But you pick them with the understanding that they're going to do what they are bound to do under the terms of their job. I would understand if you're picking people who have all kinds of crazy ideas that you don't know about. But these people make a promise that they're going to represent us, and yet you look at the Iran poll that we looked at. We do not want it, and yet the Democrats just don't seem
Well,
to care.
David, our friend Bill reminded us during the break that 98% of all incumbents get reelected. If you can see that your incumbent is constantly voting for his or her party over what you want, why do we keep
But it begs
reelecting
the
them?
question, Rick, well, what's the choices? You know, the choices that we often have
choices,
aren't
whoever's
very
running
good.
against
And the
them.
polls aren't even really surprising. If you think about it, how many people do you know, or even yourselves? When you think out, you know, like over the last 10 years, how many people are working harder, longer hours, and making less money than they were a decade ago? The frustration's there, but we, like you said, we
You
make
know,
mistakes.
we always say that, Bill. We say people are too busy. They have to work, they have families, they have all these things. But as somebody very smart once said, democracy is hard work. And why do we not have that same commitment to democracy that we do have for our families and our jobs? Isn't it just as important?
It's every bit as important. And you know, the option always is just get rid of the incumbent politician. Just get rid of
Except
it.
that we don't.
We don't. That's what's crazy about it. We sit there, and those poll numbers indicate most of America are Barry Goldwater conservatives, and we insist on returning people that we don't think do a very good
Well, I
job.
hope
Take the
people will
country in
think-
the wrong
I hope
country.
people will think about this. But you know, everybody's so angry. I understand, but who should you be angry at? So listen, let's switch gears completely. It's back to school time, and for many kids, that means it's back to mystery meat and other delicacies from the school cafeteria. September 30th is the deadline for Congress to decide whether or not to reauthorize or change the National School Lunch Program. That was the program that was supposedly changed back in 2010, thanks to the First Lady, Michelle Obama's Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act. Now, I say supposedly because look at some of these photos. Should Congress, well, let's look at the photos first. Oh yeah, I want that today.
Oh, Oreos, yep, a nice pack of Oreos.
That's pretty scary. Okay.
Actually, it looks pretty much like what I had when I went to school. At least I know it. Well, I don't know what that is. I'm sorry. I was going to say I know what it is, but I don't know what that is.
Keto and green beans.
All right, so here's a possible solution. Should Congress have to eat the same food they're making school children eat when they go to their own congressional dining room, Heather Hansen?
Absolutely. They should at least know what it's going to be. I mean, anybody taking a look at that, not only does it look unappetizing, it doesn't look healthy. Oreos?
It didn't look like much of anything. Well, the Oreos was the only thing I was going to eat off of that.
I think it's a great idea. You know, you make them eat that, I think the laws will change very
They
quickly.
should eat their own policy, absolutely.
See, everybody's comfortable with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
All right. Finally, President Obama has traveled to Alaska to talk climate change, to rename a mountain. And when he's there, he's going to tape an episode of Running Wild with Bear Grylls. Is this a good use of the president's time, quickly?
No, but he likes those reality TV shows.
Bill?
No, it's just silly. We got much bigger
I
problems.
know what you're going to say.
I like it. I like the fact that he's doing this. I think that's great.
Well,
You know,
oh,
you
interesting.
don't know.
That's not what I thought. I think it's silly. That's all we have for tonight. I'm Rick Unger, and on behalf of the panel, I thank you for joining us tonight. Be sure to stay tuned because you know what's coming up next. It's the Steve Malzberg Show, and it's a good one. We'll see you tomorrow night. Bye-bye.